Welcome, everybody, to the Fond Pod, the Fondcast. This is Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing, and this is Cody back with a second episode here from my James Bond 60th anniversary watch through. Today, we're going to be talking about the second film in the franchise called From Russia with Love. It is following up on the success that they had with Dr. No. It wasn't like a huge hit, but it still made back, I think, like 6 times its budget or something when all was said and done. So I know the producers of the movie were given double the budget to make this next one, and definitely shows that they spent a lot more money, both in terms of the sequences of action, the locations, the props that are used, the vehicles that are used in this. It's a larger cast. It's a more complex movie by far. So you can definitely tell they spent a lot more money on this one than they did the first one. But is it better or not? And more importantly, is this a classic or is this crap? Let's get into it. So if you joined me on the last episode, again, I am watching through all of these films, 60th anniversary of Bond in America. And I came up with the criteria that I used in the last podcast. If you listened, Dr. No received a score of 70. And that was the exact cutoff of a classic. 1 point lower, it would have been considered crap, which would have been pretty sad for the first Bond film, but it's skirted by the ever so slimmest margin. My criteria again here, just real quick to run through this. You get 5 points for the title, 10 points for the theme music of the movie, 15 for the portrayal of Bond in the movie, 15 for the women in the movie, 10 for the villains, 30 for the plot, and 15 for the action. I'll also give you the favorite line of the film as we go through. So, From Russia with Love. This one, as I mentioned, is a much more complex movie. And we, as the viewers, know more than the characters do as we're watching here. A little dramatic irony in this one, as we're shown some scenes that obviously people in the movie are not privy to. And this one in particular, they do show the audience kind of the behind the scenes, behind the plot, the secret plot, if you will, of a few characters, which it's always a choice when you're making a film, because there's certainly other films that have many characters who do this that maybe we are not privy to seeing what their true motivation was or what happened at a particular moment, and then we, along with the characters, are trying to figure out, what's their true motivation, whose side are they really on, etc. But they don't give us a lot of that angle in this. What they do give us is some more world building here, and we're no strangers to world building here in 2023 when you stop to consider, things like the comic universes, the MCU and the DC extended universe, or whatever they're going to attempt to call that. We have, franchises that have many installments in them, and we've seen crossover events on TV, etc. So what they do in this one is a little world building, like I mentioned. We have this organization, Spectre, that was introduced in the first film, and we are given maybe 4 times during the movie kind of a behind-the-scenes glimpse at what's happening there. We see somebody partially on camera, partially off camera. We mostly see his arm, and we know he has a fuzzy cat, and he's referred to as number 1 in Spectre. And we have a lady named Kleb, who is considered number 3, and then we have another gentleman they call number 5 in this movie. And so we can kind of see as the viewer that there is this hierarchy behind the scenes of the villains that are against James Bond and attempting world domination, world takeover, evil machinations, that type of thing. So that's kind of interesting that we see, there is a bureaucracy, if you will, to the terrorists, or whatever you want to call them, Spectre. So that's kind of neat. Let's get into the rankings here, and we'll talk about some more points as we go through this film. I'm going to start with the title for 5 points. This one's called From Russia with Love. It's a simple title, but I actually really enjoy this title. It kind of encapsulates some of the characters in the movie who are from Russia. Primarily the main antagonist in this film, as well as the love interest, the Bond woman, if you will, are both from Russia. And Bond definitely has some sort of a relationship with the female in this movie. We'll just talk about in a second here. And it's just so simple. It's like something you'd write like on a postcard, that you sent back home, from Russia with love. I really like the title. I like how simplistic it is. So I gave it the full 5 points out of 5 on that. In terms of the theme, we have kind of interesting thing here, and this one's a little tricky to rate, just like the last one was, where they had the blended songs. The instrumental version at the beginning of this is very beautiful. It's a very beautiful song called "From Russia with Love." From Russia with Love, and that's kind of the big band sound they have at the beginning of this one as well. And then when you get to the end credits, they actually redo the song, but with lyrics, which is interesting. And a guy named Matt Monroe is responsible for a lot of the music early in these films, the first two at least here. And it's his singing is good. It's very 60s. I don't know what you want to say, not like pop or rock, but very 60s, like movie theme-ish, I guess. Kind of canned, where he stretches the lyrics here and there to make them fit the notes, etc. But it's good. It's not great. It's not as iconic as what I consider some of the later themes to be. Also doesn't have the benefit of introducing the world to that iconic James Bond theme song like the last movie had. So I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. Pretty good. 15 points for the portrayal of Bond in this movie. I thought Sean Connery took his performance up a level in this one. His passion for the female Tanya in this movie seemed more realistic at parts. His choreography and the scenes, what he was expected to do in terms of running and punching and choking and shooting and fighting and hiding and all these other things, I thought he did a really good job with that. We kind of were introduced to Bond and Dr. No, and here in From Russia with Love, Connery really seems to feel comfortable in this role, and I think that really came through with his performance. So I'm going to give this a 14 out of 15. I really thought he did a nice job playing James Bond in this film. 15 points for the woman in this, the Bond lady, if you will. Last movie we had Honey Rider, and some of my complaints were that she didn't really have a lot to do. So the Bond woman in this film is Tatiana Romanova, and she's just called Tanya for short. She is much more of an equal to James Bond, though, and honestly, I thought did a much better performance. It was a harder role than Ursula Andress had in Dr. No. She was really just there for arm candy, you could tell. But Tanya is somebody who poses as his wife for part of the film. She is involved in shootouts for part of the film. She is, even getting a little physical at parts, but she's there running through burning buildings and in the middle of danger scenes and all these other things. And this is played by a actress named Daniela Bianchi, perhaps. She is gorgeous. Oh my God. I just have to say, I don't know if some people might be enthralled with Ursula Andress from the last movie I covered, but this Daniela Bianchi is gorgeous in this movie. She's fantastic. She's beautiful and gives a much more complex. She's afforded the opportunity to do more things with her character than Ursula Andress was in the last movie. I gave her a 12 out of 15 on this. Really good. Really liked her character. Gonna be sad because I presume she's not in the next movie, even though they left together to presumably carry on their relationship at the end. Which, P.S. This is like the second movie in a row where James Bond was like making love to a lady in a boat as the credits roll. So I got to keep an eye out for that and see if that's like a recurring thing or what the heck's going on here. Okay, next up is the villains. Now, villains is very hard to rate in this one for a couple reasons. As mentioned, we do get the behind-the-scenes glimpse of number 1, number 3, and number 5 from Spectre. Number 5 has the whole plan for this movie. Number 3, Kleb, the lady, is the one who chooses the agents for this movie that are going to actually go out and do the mission. And number 1 is kind of just behind the scenes again. So there's some interesting hierarchy, as I mentioned earlier, with how this organization works. But if I'm being fair here, none of them are the primary villain in this movie. Kleb chooses a Russian soldier who has been trained to kill people very quickly. He's in great shape. This is played by Robert Shaw, which I had to do a double take at because, I know him from things like Jaws and other roles where he's this really gruff guy. And here he's got this, we'll talk about just a second here. But anyway, he plays a character named Red, Red Grant in this. And this is a character who is done favors by the way this movie is shot. So let me talk for just a second about the framing in this movie and the cinematography. There are various scenes that are so well done, and I mean so much better than the first film, where we get these wonderfully framed shots of like a character on the edge of the screen on one side and a character on the opposite edge of the screen who are in like different rooms or can't see each other or something like that. But we as the viewer pick up on the tension in that scene. We're like, he's right there. He's right there. Like, watch out, watch out. Even though they can't see that. There's a wonderful tracking sequence along the locomotive, which I'll talk about in a second too, where James Bond is walking in the foreground and Red is walking behind him in the train, but we're watching him walk through the windows basically parallel with James Bond. Really effective shot. It's really creepy to just see somebody like stalking his prey. He's like a big cat waiting to pounce basically on Bond. The character is pretty well done. Later on, he kills another agent that Bond was supposed to meet and poses as that agent. And the last movie I mentioned, it was an hour and 20 minutes in before we saw Dr. No. This movie actually goes an hour and 19 minutes before we hear the main antagonist speak. And so it's interesting. He's supposedly a Russian agent. We never hear him talk the entire movie. He is just silently prowling and watching Bond throughout this entire film. When he finally does speak, he's posing as this, British intelligence guy that Bond was supposed to meet. And he's got this cheerio accent. Yes, James Bond, chop, chop, old man. So it kind of doesn't fit the character, but it's interesting to like hear the voice finally come out of the person, and it doesn't really necessarily match. Pretty cool antagonist. Nothing really particularly special about this guy, but well done. This is a good performance. I give it a 7 out of 10. Okay, on to the plot and the action for the last 30 and 15 points. This movie was leaps and bounds more complex than Dr. No. The first half of the movie, they're running around, I believe, Istanbul in Turkey, I want to say, and we get some of the Roma culture, the gypsy culture. We are seeing some of the local contacts Bond has there. They're sneaking under embassies. They're going through the sewers. We have double agents. We have people being killed in various places. And this character, Red, is really like very tidy with how he kills people. And it's an interesting plot, too, because we have Spectre trying to, if I understand this correctly, Spectre's trying to steal a decoding device that the Russians have leaked so that they can give it to the intelligence of the West. But in reality, Kleb, who is posing as a Russian agent, is really working for Spectre, and therefore it's her way to get Tanya into the field to get this decoding machine so that Spectre can actually get it back and eliminate James Bond. It's a confusing situation, but essentially it was a long, drawn-out plot to get rid of James Bond and get revenge for what happened with Dr. No. Now, it's interesting, too, that Tanya is hired by Kleb to work for the Russians, not knowing that Kleb is also number 3 in Spectre. And so she's using her guys as a Russian officer as a way to get Tanya to cooperate and seduce James Bond, et cetera, et cetera. But it's really Spectre who's calling the shots behind the scenes. And there's a good moment later on when James Bond realizes and puts all the pieces together as well. So there is a little mystery for him, even though we, again, as the viewer, know all of this. And I have to think yet again, in a more modern movie, perhaps we may not know some of these scenes, some of the information, and it might come out kind of organically later on, a la, like a more modern mystery style. The second half of the movie, because this is about a 2 hour movie, is interesting because we've already had this pretty good spy thriller, and then they go on a train. And movies set on trains can go one of two ways because, it's claustrophobic, it's very tight quarters, it makes it harder to get good shots because you can't physically move a camera around the space as much. But this is so well shot. The stuff that's on the train is so well done. It really is like James Bond meets Murder on the Orient Express, more or less. His buddy dies on the train. The Russian agent who's fighting his buddy died on the train, but really it was Red that killed both of them. And Bond doesn't know that the girl is working for the Russians. And then the guy reveals finally in the big fight scene that he's from Spectre. And the fight scene is pretty tense. Bond comes up with a really creative way to dispose of this guy and win the day, etc. And they get off the train, and I kind of summarized that part quick because that's about 30 to 40 minutes of the movie, probably. They get off the train and trying to find a way to get across this border, and there was this elaborate setup for Red to get off, which James Bond kind of commandeers the truck that the guy had hired to meet him there. And then after that, they drive for a while, and then a helicopter comes to attack them. And this kind of gets into goofy levels almost towards the end because it's like the train was awesome. And then, we get into this driving scene and then the helicopter's attacking them. Bond shoots the helicopter, grenade explodes, blows up the helicopter, etc. Oh, they survive yet again. They hop on a boat, but wait, no, there's 3 other boats chasing them across the waters. They're trying to get across the border still. And luckily, there's all these tanks of gasoline that roll off Bond's boat with Tanya, not Honey, that was last movie, which blow up, kill all the ships that are chasing them. They escape for a third time, essentially, and that's the end of the movie. No, it's not. I'm just kidding. Then we have a fourth scene at the end here where Kleb, who has been admonished by number 1, and number 5 has been killed for his failure. She goes out into the field herself in an attempt to stop Bond, posing as a housekeeper, and gets into his hotel room to steal the decoding machine. And essentially, Tanya turns on her at the very last second to protect Bond because she's in love with him. And Kleb is stopped as well. And finally, Bond and Tanya escape and yet again are out on a boat in Venice, I believe, a gondola type thing. And end of the movie, credits roll yet again. So this is, I don't even know, maybe there's probably a director that's famous for fake endings, but this was definitely like the psych out ending that I don't know needed to be. I could have used like 1 or 2. And they got off the train. That had been tense for so long that, finally I was able to breathe, except no, as the audience, I wasn't allowed to, because then we had the truck scene with the helicopter, then we had the boat scene, and then we had the Kleb scene of her trying to stab him with her poisoned knife that comes out of her shoe, of all things, which is pretty funny. He like held her back with the chair by like holding her against the door, but that was all pretty fun. I mean, I don't know if we needed all that stuff, but I'm going to give the plot a 25 out of 30. Really good movie. I enjoyed this one way more than the last one in terms of the story. And then action on this one, maybe like a 13 out of 15. It had almost everything you could want. You still would like to see Bond himself involved a little bit more in some of the like physical stuff. He does have better chops here, though. It's better than Dr. No. So add all of that up here. I got 13, 25, 7, 12, 14, 7, and 5 on this one. Gives us a grand total, if you can't tell, of better than Dr. No. This is an 83 out of 100. This is going to be firmly in the classic category. I should point out, I'm not looking at like other rankings for these movies as well, as long as I watch these. So I'm kind of curious to give all of my numbers all the way through and then go back and check out what the critics or the users have given these movies, because I honestly don't know which ones are considered to be the good ones, which ones are considered to be the stinkers, etc. So 83 out of 100, definitely a better movie than Dr. No. If you don't mind starting with the second film in the franchise instead of the first, this was a great one to go in. A really good spy thriller. Good action in this. A better lady. The villain was so-so, but good locales. You could tell more money was spent on this one, as I said. My favorite line from this one, it was tough. There was a lot, honestly, of good puns in this one. But I chose the one from pretty early in the movie. There's a minor villain who has a hideout behind like a big neon sign, and his secret exit, because they had people pose as policemen to go to the front door. And so the guy used his secret exit to escape. And there's this big painting of a woman on the neon sign, and his secret escape essentially is that her mouth opens and then he crawls out of her mouth and down a ladder or a rope, I think, and that's how he escapes. And so they have the policeman knock on the door, and predictably the guy opens the door in the woman's mouth, and they, not Bond but his friend, shoots the guy as he's trying to exit and kills one of the minor, problem people in Istanbul. And Bond quips, "She should have kept her mouth shut," which is just funny because there you go. But there are a lot of good lines in this one too. A lot of good puns. Some of them are groaners, but I don't know. Anyway, it kind of makes me wonder why they did that. I guess they've always included those in the Bond movies, but it's interesting how much more serious the movie might be if those weren't in there. But anyway. Oh, all right. That is From Russia with Love. A really good one, folks. I really enjoyed that one. If I get through a couple stinkers in a row, this may be a bit more challenging this summer as I go. But this one, even more than Dr. No, I definitely enjoyed. So keeping track of my aggregates here, this is going to jump to the best movie. Sometime towards the end, maybe I'll give you my final rankings. But as of now, From Russia with Love is my top pick of the two that I've seen. And this has been another episode of Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing, the Fondcast. If you haven't heard of us before, go back and listen to our old episodes. We got some really good stuff out there. Supernatural in television, movies, music, true crime, some wrestling things in there. We got all sorts of topics. We got a lot of hosts that are typically on these. This is just me for the minis here this summer for the Bond Watch Along. But stop in and check out our co-hosts, Justin and Brett and Joe and Dave and Matt and other people I'm probably forgetting as well. Blue, can't forget him. Whoever else I'm forgetting, probably somebody out there. But check us out. We're all over social media, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, and also Twitter. You'll find us streaming on all your favorite podcast platforms. Maybe you're listening to us right now on one of those. Facebook, Audible, Amazon, Spotify. What else are we on these days? Man, we have iTunes, Podcast Addict, Stitcher, and some others. So definitely stop and check us out. You stop over to www.fondpodcast.com to check out our website, meet the host, order some swag from our podcast as well, and watch for us soon as we'll be invading wrestling coming up on the 21st. Second row, you're going to see our sign as we'll be there. AEW Dynamite. All right, everybody, take care. And by all means, tell your friends about us. Listen to some of our old stuff. Give us some 5-star reviews. Help us expand the Fond Empire. That's it, everybody. We'll see you next time on Friends Occasionally Not Disagreeing.